All right, everyone, let's do this. How are you? Good? Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? If you're new here, welcome. I was going to do this thing where I try to say welcome in a different language every week, but I really only know how to say it in Spanish. Anyway, on the show today is my good friend Gary Rees. Gary is a lighting tech who's been in the industry or been doing lighting in some sort or form or fashion for a little over 30 years. We talk about that, how he got into the business, things that he's done, things that he's accomplished. And then we start talking about Gary's stepfather, a guy by the name of Geoff Nicholls. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because he was a member of Black Sabbath for several years. He was their offstage keyboard player. He recorded on Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, every album Sabbath did up until Dehumanizer, or maybe one more. Anyway, Gary gets into talking about all the stuff that Geoff did, this archive of music he's found of his that featured his first band, Quartz, and a couple of bands that he was in before that. It's a really interesting conversation if you're a Sabbath fan, if you're a music fan. I really highly suggest you check this out because Gary's got some great stories about his stepdad. Anyway, I'm not going to give it away anymore. Let's check it out.
Okay. So me, I've been in this business since I was 16 as a lighting tech in some format or other, and I work for the probably infamous Light and Sound Design, a historical, famous company in the lighting world.
Well, tell everyone who you are first.
I'm Gary Rees. I'm born and raised in Birmingham, England. I'm a lighting tech, and I live just outside London in the nice home counties, as they're called, in Buckinghamshire. So, been living here about 20 years, and I've been doing some television work during the COVID period, and I've got back again in the last year into touring again. So, since there was not much touring during for a couple of years.
I know, right?
As you might remember, yeah.
And we met in April, May, correct?
Yeah. Oh, May it was, on Duran Duran.
Yeah, we met there, and we got to talking, and then you dropped a bomb on me.
Oh, well, you were asking, he said, do you know this area? I said, yeah, I'm from this town, actually, even though I don't live here anymore. And you were saying there's some kind of Black Sabbath shrine around here. I said, oh, yeah, let me get the Google Maps out. It's about a 5-minute walk from the arena on the canals in the city centre of Birmingham, and down to walk along the canal to the Black Sabbath bridge, and you went on your pilgrimage to the drum tech. I remember.
Yeah.
And then Skippy comes along and goes, "Oh, tell me your connection to Black Sabbath." And my connection. Yeah. So anyway, just going back to me for a moment. So I'll keep it brief. Yeah. So I've been touring really for about 30 odd years, 33 years maybe. Although I've done lighting since 1984, some format of locally or working in light and sound designs, where I first started with a little lighting company doing pub gigs and universities around Birmingham. White van, little van with eight power cans, maybe 12, but it was a big rig, 24 power cans in pubs and little clubs and stuff. So there wasn't a lot of technology available at that time, not in our little reach anyway. So, and then progressed from there, got a job light and sound design in the warehouse, and progressed to touring, and now that's what I do at my ripe old age of 55. So, I haven't got many years left ahead of me doing it. So.
Why lighting?
I say that though, in lighting, I don't know. You don't know. It's quite tiring though, touring, and it's a different industry now as well. It's a lot more serious now, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very, very. It's all about the tech now.
I don't have to prove anything anymore. I've done the Michael Jackson tours, I've done the Metallicas, I've done all the. I could drop a load of names here. I won't bother with too many. Of course, Duran Duran. Birmingham. So, yeah.
Why lighting? What attracted you to lighting?
Nothing really. What it was when I was 16 in England, it's 16. In 1984, you could leave school at 16. You didn't have to go on to 18 like you do now. It's like a couple of years at college. It wasn't an obligation. So you had a choice in my town. You used to have all the car factory bosses coming around, the union bosses trying to employ us. And I knew at that point, and because of my background, I knew that there was no way It's not because I think it's detrimental. There's no way I'm going to work in the car factories like every, generations before me in my family. And that. I mean, there were good jobs. Don't get me wrong. There were good jobs at that time, but we don't make them anymore. So you had a careers office at school that helped you with your decisions in your career. And obviously, just like Nick Rhodes said once, I think, in an interview, I wanted to be an international rock star. But, unfortunately, there weren't many vacancies in Birmingham. I think UB40, Dexys Midnight Runners, and of course, Duran Duran had taken all the places, so there was none left. So, but that didn't go down so well. But, so there was something called a youth training scheme in Birmingham, which were government schemes where they'd pay you a paltry amount of money rather than signing on the welfare or the dole. You could do that. So I did a youth training scheme and did 6 weeks electronic engineering. Then you had to find a work placement to be on for 6 weeks. So I was phoning around studios, and there were no studios available. Everybody had got one of the YTS kids. So I thought, I'm doing something in the music. And I found in spitting distance from the college, a company called Concert Lighting, who did like little bits and pieces. They did like electrical installations in clubs for the lighting systems and universities, and also at night time they provided lights for local bands. So that's where I started. Did that for a year until that ran out. Then I was not working for a while. So then I got a job at Light and Sound Design in the warehouse, sweeping the bloody floors and helping build prep rigs. Right at the bottom.
Yeah.
So, and that's the rest is history. So,
and still doing it.
Yeah, but I've had breaks from it. I've done TV lighting for about 5 years. I went off and did that, in studios, and in the last couple of years, I've done some ITV UK channel dramas as well, and I do still keep my hand in doing stuff for Apple TV. It's massive. It's the television industry in Britain is absolutely booming. Studios are going up about the tax breaks.
Yeah.
But you don't have heavy unions here. So. Yeah, I mean, just down the road from in my village where I live now, they're always filming stuff. I don't know if the US viewers be familiar. There's like a detective TV, a country detective guy. It was called Midsummer Murders, and they film a lot of that around here. They've been doing films around here. I'm surrounded by studios in smaller towns and places. They're building one nearby as well. It's just, and Pinewood, which is about a 15-minute drive away, that's expanding, but going massive, like a Hollywood studio. So there's like a theme park there and everything. So things are happening on that front. So that's a little parachute for me if I, tried to stop doing the music.
Yeah. So, do you think about it sometimes, like when you started to the technology now, like how you've progressed? Because you've as a lighting person in lighting, you have to constantly learn the new technology.
Yeah, but not always. I mean, if I'm crew chiefing and stuff, I don't have to know exactly everything about it. You get some of the young whiz kids to do that, it's quite hard to keep up with everything now. It's changing so much all the time, and there's new lights. I can't keep up with the new lights, to be honest. It's like every time I turn my back and go to a new job, it's like there's another light. It looks like the last one, but it's got a lot more channels. It's like, oh God, even bigger. But yeah, it's quite hard to keep up with it. But the lights are light. You learn about it, you set it, and thing is, things don't break like they used to. We used to spend hours fixing equipment in a little hospital under the stage, or by the side of the stage, or in a room if we were lucky. It's all day just fixing the lights. You don't seem to do that. They don't want you to do that anymore. Lights don't break as frequently now either.
Yeah, and
stuff is modular, so you just swap a whole cartridge out and put a new one in. So you're not even allowed to do that now. I don't think. You just send it back and they send you a new one out. No,
when I spoke with, I believe it was either Skippy or Cosmo, and they were talking about the Very lights, and a friend of mine said he was there when they first brought them out, and they called them Barely lights because they barely worked.
Yeah, I remember all that. Yeah, and well into the late 80s and 90s, they used to put a curtain around it because of industrial espionage. What's going on behind the curtain? They were fixing the lights in the back of there always. Yeah, that was quite funny. Yeah, industrial espionage.
So were you a musician too? Did you play? Did you want to be a?
I'm actually sitting in my studio full of retro gear, which my son's made a bit of a mess of at the moment. I'll show you a bit of retro gear there. Can you see
Oh wow.
the real surreal there? A
Yeah.
TRK 3340S, and that is part of what the next story I'm going to tell you about, actually. And there's my beloved city there on the painting up there. That's Birmingham skyline back in about 2000, and they rebuilt it. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of retro. I could spend you a whole series there just looking at all my gear, but I know some have inherited, and a lot of it is my own as well. Yeah, so there you go. So this is I spent my lockdown not in this because I hadn't built it by, and I was actually in the attic of my house with the real surreal. So I've got boxes of storage, and that's where I spent months and months of the lockdown. It's with the reels of tape, food dehydrated to bake the tapes, and anyway, that's the next part. I'll be jumping ahead here. So,
Right on, man. Right on. Well, we did talk. Once we started talking about, once you started telling, I got back from the Black Sabbath bridge, then you dropped the next bomb on me. And,
okay. So my natural father left when I was about 2. My mother had several jobs, and one of them was in around the corner from my grandmother's, who babysitted me. She had a job as in like a cabaret club where they had bands and resident bands. Anyway, she was a waitress there, and that's where Geoff was playing, Geoff Nicholls, in a band called Johnny Neal and the Starliners, which are a cabaret band which had been on national television. Back in about this is about say 1970. It's not the year they met, but in 1970, when there was still a program went into the 80s called Opportunity Knocks. It's the equivalent of it today would be Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, X Factor, that sort of. So they'd have cabaret acts and bands on. Anyway, what had happened was Geoff was in a psychedelic pop band called World of Oz, which you can find on Spotify, and they'd split up just as their album had come out, their first and only album. It's a long story, interesting one. And while he was at a loose end, a friend of his, there's this local band called Johnny Neal and the Starliners, who Bill Ward talks about actually on one of his radio podcasts. Anyway, I digress. He this guy called John Fox, who used to play for Johnny Neal, said to Johnny Neal, he's at a loose end. A couple of his band members, a keyboard player and a guitarist, had left. So they said, look, I know this guy, Geoff Nicholls. He plays guitar and he plays keyboards. So do you want to try him out? And he did. So he helped him out for a few weeks. And during that few weeks, they got a letter back from a TV company. Johnny had sent in like an audition tapes 2 years before, and now the TV company, Thames Television, wanted them to go on to Opportunity Knocks. So Geoff's ears pricked up, and he stayed with them. It wasn't what he wanted to do, but he was earning good money, and they won it for 5 weeks in a row. And there was some scandal where they got knocked off. There was like a vote rigging, and there's a book on it actually, because there was a big court case by an Australian band. Anyway, so in those days we only had 3 TV channels. So and Opportunity Knocks got 19 million people watching it, but then the only other TV show was a soap opera called Coronation Street, which had 19 million people as well. So that was the 2 big shows. So they were seen by a lot of people. And they won it for 5 weeks. And after that, for a few years, they lived off the back of that. They had a single out. They were managed by Don Arden, the infamous Don Arden, Sharon Osbourne's father.
Yeah.
He saw them on the TV, got hold of them, signed them up, got a single out, which had moderate success. And after that, they got away from Don. He wasn't doing anything for them. He had other projects on the go. So, there's a few stories there, but it's too short a podcast to go into that. I think I've got a lot of podcasts.
Don was a hard man, right?
Oh, yeah. They saw a few things which were like, oof. Oh, yeah. It didn't threaten them or anything, but there's a few promoters who suffered the wrath of Don Arden. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, eventually, he met my mother during that residency at that club, Yardley in Birmingham. And then shortly after that, Johnny had gone to Rhodesia. He got job offers out there, and Geoff said, no, I want to carry on here. I want to play in a rock band. So and that was where he was leading to. So he met up with a bunch of guys who eventually became the band Bandy Legs, which eventually became the band new wave of British heavy metal band Quartz years later. Anyway, he joined up with them. They had a residency there. So yeah, by the age of 5, Geoff was a part of my mother's life. So, and I was always at gigs. I was in studios at that age. I can vaguely remember it. I was a bit of a nuisance, apparently, at the age of 5, running around under mixing desks. And so then years later, they changed the name to Quartz. I've been on tour with Black Sabbath, and they became Quartz. They were signed to, I think it's Jet Records. I think that was Don Arden.
Yeah.
So he appeared again. Yeah, Jet Records. And Tony Iommi loved them anyway, so he helped them out, and he produced the album, their 1977 debut album, which you can find on Spotify. So Quartz, they went on, and by 1979, Sabbath were in a Black Sabbath. Tony and Geoff had formed a friendship anyway, but by that 79, obviously the Aussie leaving, and the band was in quite turmoil. And they had to get a new album out. They were in Beverly Hills in a rented house. And they just got Dio in. And Geoff got a call. Says, can you come and help us out for 2 weeks playing bass? The geezer's not there. And that's where it started. He was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. He didn't go on holiday with us. We went because it was like a friend of the family. He went to US, and we went on holiday to Spain. But anyway, he ended up staying 25 years. Instead of 2 weeks. So, there you go. So,
with Black Sabbath.
With Black Sabbath, as sort of a helping out, he was there in the background for a lot of the career. Whether that was right or not, that's the way it was. The band was always in, from my perspective, always had like turmoil with managers and, legal wranglings. The Dio era to me was great. I know you're probably a Black Sabbath purist. So for you, it's the Aussie period.
Well, we've had this conversation, you and and then I've had this conversation with several people, and I guess I had to grow out of but I do appreciate the Dio years. I do think that Heaven and Hell is probably one of the greatest metal albums ever.
An amazing album. So,
and I think you and I had this conversation. I think they should have gone a different name, which I've read that they wanted to.
Yeah, they wanted to. Tony did, but the record company had always pulled that name back in because it was a bigger name. But who knows what would happen?
Yeah. So Geoff's first album with them was Heaven and Hell.
And Hell, then Mob Rules, Born Again. What was that after that? Seventh Star, Eternal Idol. Then all that Tony Martin era, which I believe is going to be released in a box set. Was told me within the next 12 months.
Yeah, just read that.
Can't get. Yeah. So Tony Martin. There's a lot of people, especially in like South America, who don't really listen to the old Sabbath. They only listen to the Tony Martin era for some reason, especially in Brazil. Tony Martin is quite big out there, and got a big fan base, and Geoff has as well. So it's massive Brazilian following that.
Yeah, Tony Martin's got an amazing voice. He was, and what did he do after he went on to do the Headless Cross, right? Tony Martin.
Yeah, I did Tia or whatever it's, I don't know how you pronounce TYR, that album.
Mm-hmm.
So up until about 95, and then after that, the original Sabbath lineup. So that was the end of the road there for the moment.
So growing up around all this, were you aware of as a young age of what was going on? Like how cool it was, what he was doing?
Yeah, I think I took it for granted really, because I wasn't really as a teenager. I wasn't really a metalhead. I appreciate. Today, I'm more into metal now than I was when I was young. Believe it or not, I know it sounds absolutely daft. Maybe that's my part of my rebellion. We always had synthesizers around the house. It was like, wow, out of people's reach. Look, for the nerds out there, that one I remember the first one he brought home in 1980 was a Yamaha CS80, which is a massive beast. They're worth £16,000 now to buy one of them in the UK, which is about $20,000, I believe. Something like that. So, yeah, so it was playing on them as kids, and people used to come to our house because believe it or not, we lived for 7 years after Geoff joined Sabbath. We still lived in I don't know what you call it, social housing. We didn't have bought a house. We had no money. We weren't impoverished. I'm saying there was no big money, but we had all these lavish bits of equipment around. And when he was away, he'd leave that there. Wouldn't necessarily take that synth to be the next one. So me and my friends would be around, and little drum machines, they were analog ones, or be having them around. And we were all in that time, all the synthesizer music, electronic music was booming. So we were like into all that, and we had the instruments to try and emulate it, but not very well. So,
did you
people wouldn't believe me. I'd stop telling people who Geoff was and what he did. No way. You live in that small apartment and blah blah blah. There was like, and people come to the house. A few of my close friends and go, "Blimey, this," and there'd be gold discs lying around. So, but it was quite surreal. But I had quite a normal upbringing. I didn't really have a lot to do with the Sabbath. I mean, obviously I went to live shows and that, but we still lived a relatively normal life. It wasn't like there was like, chicks that passed out around the house and loads of blow everywhere. It was not like that at all. This was a normal working class upbringing. It just happened to be this eccentric Geoff Nicholls who, played in Black Sabbath.
When he would come home from tour, would he just be Geoff, not Geoff Nicholls of Black Sabbath?
Yeah, and obviously, I think the first few years, looking back in retrospect, I could see he was taken in by that whole lifestyle. He was jetting around everywhere, back and forwards across the Atlantic, and the glamour was there for him, but I think he had a good balance of switching it off when he got home. There was no part. He was he didn't really go out much, and a lot of the time he spent time writing and in the little home studio, and it was always there strumming away. I thought the TV shows I was watching used to have heavy metal background music, but until years later I realised they didn't. It was just Geoff there on the sofa with a little practice amp, always playing scales and everything. So yeah, it's it was always quite a musical household.
So his role in Sabbath was he was the keyboard player.
Yeah,
but he would also play guitar on some songs.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, very little. I think he did when he played keyboards with the original lineup, and he'd be hidden away somewhere. But he was playing rhythm on, I think, at least one song.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's what I was going to say. I suppose it was quite surreal now looking back at my childhood. I just carried on and did my own thing. I didn't really get that involved in it, believe it or not.
Really?
It's only now that, I went to a few shows, obviously, and met musicians. I mean, I've got a little anecdote here. After what's his name, Glenn Hughes was a singer on Seventh Star, and the tour was in quite turmoil. I think he, had problems with his voice and other things going on, so he got fired. They brought in a young guy called Ray Gillen.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Ian Gillen. So I was 18, I just started work at Light and Sound Design. Anyway, I come back, it was a hot summer's day, and I remember coming home, and there's like a window open. I was walking up down the road, I could hear some real high singing. So I came in, up the stairs, and on the landing was Ray Gillen. And he goes, "Hi, how you doing?" I says, "I'm Ray." I says, "I'm Gary." And Geoff was because they were in the studio, and he was teaching him the songs, like coaching him. And that's what Geoff used to do. He used to do, if a new singer or a new drummer, he used to put them through the songs. But for some reason, he was like I don't know if he's a musical director, but he'd be the one who coached them through teaching them the songs. And he was there recording on the landing, headphones on, microphone there, and he was screaming, into the microphone. And Geoff was recording it on a 4-track cassette, and I found those cassettes actually.
Really?
Yeah, obviously for private listening.
Yeah. Well, Ray went on to sing for Badlands.
Yeah,
with Ozzy's.
He left it.
Ozzy's,
he left abruptly.
Yeah, because he wasn't in Sabbath very long, and I don't think there's any recordings with Ray in Sabbath.
Yes, there was. I think they've re-released Eternal Idol. I think he did, and they've re-released it with the vocals of him as a bonus CD. And obviously Tony Martin did those vocals on the official release.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit of a but a revolving door of singers around late. I mean, my perspective is obviously limited. You know, I only know what I saw, and you know what I seen, and what I, you know, when artifacts. Obviously, when Geoff sadly passed away in 2017, I'm sorting out my mother's house at the moment. I'm coming across all sorts of artifacts and things, which is quite interesting. Not just to do with Geoff Nicholls and Sabbath. It's just all sorts of his history of his bands he played. I mean, I found the jacket of the band Johnny Needle and the Starliners they were wearing when they were on TV in 1970. I found the jacket. I've had it dry cleaned. I said to my son, "You're going to be wearing this, mate, on your next gig," for someplace based. So yeah, I mean, then obviously, if I can go back a bit and go back to Jeff's previous band of Chords, when they were Bandy Legs, they were signed up by one of Don Arden's I don't know, proteges called Wilf Pine. And Wilf Pine was, if you look up, there's a book, he was connections with New York Mafia. He was from the north of England, I think Newcastle, near there. Anyway, he became the manager of Bandy Legs before they became Quartz. And he also had on his books a man called Jimmy Holmes, who's a US soul singer. It wasn't that big in the US, but he had big hit songs in Europe with I'm Gonna Make You an Offer You Can't Refuse, was one of his big hits. And then in latter years, he went on to be part of a London soul trio who had some big hits in the early 90s called London Beat. So anyway, Jimmy Helms had just been signed by Pyre Records and also been managed by Wilf Pine, exactly the same as Bandy Legs. So what happened was, to showcase Bandy Legs, he got them to play their support slot to Jimmy Helms. And after that, they became the backing band, the sole backing band for Jimmy Helms' set. So they changed styles and became the backing band. Anyway, I've contacted Jimmy over the years, and he gave me a few anecdotes, and he said he loved his time with those guys. Said it was amazing. Said Birmingham music scene at that time was amazing. Said the Rum Runner Club, which is familiar to you because of Duran Duran, at that time in the mid-70s, said it was so many musicians all being signed, and said it was an absolute great vibe there, the whole city at that time, music scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose we can go on to what happened in the lockdown for me. Which, something I wanted to tell you about. 2020 lockdown came, and I had a archive of reel-to-reels going back into the 1960s, which, Jeff had actually shown me a load of this stuff. I kept discovering more and more in my mother's loft, in cupboards, reel-to-reel, quarter-inch mostly. And anyway, I had planned for a few years to go through this archive, but obviously working all the time and touring, I couldn't find the time. And anyway, I didn't have a machine that worked, so I bought. This was identical to what Jeff used to have. This TIAC A3340S 4-track machine, refurbed. And at the beginning of 2020, in the February, I went and collected it after I'd been away and it'd been refurbed, and took it home. And then the lockdown happened. I went, right, this is the perfect time and opportunity to go through this archive. So I learned about the tapes and what to do, not to put them on the machine straight away. I had to, bake the tapes, because there's something called sticky shed syndrome, which is a bit like electrical tape. They can be sticky. If you pulled electrical tape apart, it's very sticky and it's got resistance. Well, if you do that, some manufacturers of some brands of tape, the chemicals congealed over time, so you couldn't just put it on. You'd have to bake it to dry out the chemicals in the dehumidifying oven. You know what you dehydrator oven? What you do, dry out fruit and meats on for long-term storage. They use one of those, and a friend of mine who did this showed me how to do it, and I bought one of those ovens. So I'll be continually doing the batches of those overnight. Next day, I'll be going through it, and a lot of the time it wasn't what was on the label of these songs. It was like Quartz stuff, Going back to bands of the world of ours, I found like demo tapes and deco. I found the recordings of the TV show performances on Opportunity Knock, which do not exist in any of the archives of the television companies, as well, of that series.
Wow.
So that was quite interesting. And obviously, there's obviously Sabbath stuff in there, but I won't be going into too much of that. But there's still a whole archive of stuff there. And I found some interesting stuff through Jeff's career, and with the help of his former bandmates, they gave me a lot of information and background on it. And I started a YouTube channel called Geoff Nicholls Archive. I just got some of the stuff on there, which you can, have a listen anytime. And that was just great fun. I also had an idea of writing a book about Geoff's life, because he was quite an interesting life. He started out as like up to Olympic standard swimmer. And that's the way he could have gone if he hadn't chosen music. He had to tug of war with the sports career, or he was trained for trials for the Olympics back in the mid 60s.
Yeah.
As well. But he chose music, and but much to the disappointment of his coach. And there's some anecdotes there as well. His coach was furious. He used to come to the gigs going, "Nicholls, get back in the swimming pool. There's no money to be made in this." Yeah, he was right. So, yeah, I mean, there's a long way to go with the archive as well. There's sort of different formats of stuff. There's his own demos. He had lots of projects going on over the years, solo singers, since getting deals. And I mean, it's too long to go into, but
so he was very good about archiving everything.
Oh, mate, the stuff in there, I don't know, how we got it. There's some stuff I'll tell you offline sometime, but there's lots of stuff.
Well, you and I had a conversation on the road, and you were like, "I'll tell you about this," but you...
Yeah, I can't really...
No way!
For legal reasons, can't really, go into it on this podcast. But there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I could be here all day, but I had an idea for a book. So I started tracking down his old bandmates in the lockdown through phone calls, looking online. I wanted to know what happened to his band, The World of Ours. And I knew about the Boll Weevils, a couple of those guys from his first band in the 60s, rock and roll band. Anyway, then the psychedelic pop band, I couldn't find a trace of them online. I found the Mick Hopkins, who was a guitarist in Quartz. He said, "Oh, I know a couple of those guys. Here you go. Here's the number." So I phoned them up, cold, and asked them if they'd like to do an interview. So I recorded with my open speaker on my phone and a digital dictaphone and my voice, and I interviewed them, loads of questions, and played them some of the tracks. I found tracks of theirs they'd forgotten about on demos. I mean, some brilliant tunes. Which one or two are on the YouTube channel, and I managed to interview like Tony Martin, obviously Bill Ward. I contacted his agent. He gave me an interview and told me about Geoff. We just talked about Geoff, so that's on a recording. I've yet to do something with that. Bobby Rondinelli, of course, the great Johnny Neal, who was in his late 80s now, and there was that singer. He's still, live. There's a lot of people, interviews. Some people wouldn't, respond, which I quite understand. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to continue that, but there's definitely a lot of material there to write best part of a book, or even a website dedicated to Geoff, and I can just put pages of chapters on there. It's quite a niche interest, I think.
Yeah. Well, I know you turned me on to Quartz when we were on the road, and I listened to a lot of that. What I heard of it is a lot of these quote unquote stoner bands. I mean, they were doing that in the 60s. Quartz was doing that.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. You just got off the road with a band that's considered that style of music. Do you ever listen and hear like, that sounds familiar?
Yeah, sometimes. But I mean, obviously when you're working, sometimes you just switch off eventually as well. Also, going back to Quartz, they have released an album last year, and when Geoff was ill, he says, "I want my hard drives of all his ideas from Cubase and recordings given to the band, see what they can do with it." And he had some finished stuff, some unfinished stuff. So I handed over a laptop, I think the hard drive as well. Anyway, with all the ideas that Geoff had. I know they got about 3 songs on a Quartz album they released just last year on Cherry Red Records called On the Edge of No Tomorrow, and Geoff sings 3 songs on there. There's a few. It's on Spotify as well. If you listen to it. Geoff sings 3 songs on there. He plays keyboards, he plays guitar on most tracks. So it sort of revived him from the dead. So I don't know what they're recording an album at the moment, another album to release. So I don't know if Geoff's going to be on any of that. If there's any more ideas there, but so that was quite interesting as well.
What was your relationship like with Geoff?
Good. He was, he was like that. He was asking, "Was your stepdad?" He said, "Yeah, he was a stepdad, but he was sort of like I was in a big brother in some sort of way." But I respected him. He put me on the straight and narrow a few times in my life. I was getting a bit out of order. So as you grow up, you push the boundaries.
Yeah.
But he couldn't be there all the time. So I mean, to be honest, I had a great upbringing. It could have gone the other way from the places I lived in as a young kid. It could have gone the other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose, bit of a cliche. The music business saved me.
Yeah. Well, you're here talking to me. You could have, When you said you were more into like synthesizer, new wave music, were you talking about like Duran Duran, Human League?
I wasn't really into Duran Duran at that time. When you were a kid, you're a bit snobby, and I used to go, and all the girls around were screaming, and it was like, it's like the equivalent of a boy band today. Which the difference with them, they wrote their own songs and great songs, and played their own instruments. So when you was younger, it was a bit snobby, but as in recent years, you listen back, and especially on that tour, I was going, God, these are great songs there. I mean, I forgot how many hits they had.
Yeah. I wasn't a fan when I started working for them, and now they'll dig one out of their archive, and I'm like, I didn't know they played that.
Yeah, I mean, the Human League, they were good. That was obviously their earliest stuff, which is quite groundbreaking, underground, non-commercial electronics. There was loads of that band, but really, essentially, a lot of us kids, we just liked pop music. Really, I suppose it was. It's commercial, some of it not. But quite experimental times for music, I think, in the 80s. I mean, I listen to everything now. I get older. I even listen to Sabbath. I didn't at the time. I mean, people were going, God, the gift horse in the mouth there. You had all that, you didn't know, wasn't it?
Well, that's usually the way it goes, right? Like, it's right there. You're not going to deal with it. I'll talk about Geoff a little more. First album, Heaven and Hell, 1980. They made him an official member in 86. What did that mean for him as an official member?
Do you know what? I really don't know. I'll be totally honest. I don't know. I think it was probably on a more regular wage as well, and was getting included in the pictures, the photos. That was it. So you saw the lineup in there around that time in '86. He had David B. Spitz and Eric Singer on drums. So he was in the photos with them. Where other times in the past he was never in the photos. Okay. So maybe it was to do that. I don't know. So I mean, I only can tell you from my perspective. I mean, I've read so many books on things, and I've joined dots together, and with like things that I've got, documents and stuff, I can join dots together a bit more if it was my perspective. My perspective would be different.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I could write my biography of as a child outside looking in, which is how I've written. I started writing this book after with the interviews. And I've written it from my perspective, including what was going on in my life at early age and what I saw. And it's an upbeat.
Yeah. So do you feel you'll finish that this year, or?
I don't know. I need to kick myself up the backside and start it again. Life's opened up again after the COVID, but I've still got all of the interviews on audio. I've got a lot of interviews, former bandmates and people connected. There's a few people I need to badger again to see if we can get an interview, but I'm nobody. So who's gonna? And also, I'm at a disadvantage where there's certain things they probably wouldn't tell me because of who I am. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying. Yeah. So I'll be quite limited to what they'll tell me. But I mean, I've tracked people down from like the 60s who are living in Australia, South Africa, from old bandmates. And that's quite a revelation. I've joined people up as well. I've been almost like reuniting people who haven't seen each other for 30 years and stuff, 40 years. So that's been quite good. That was quite useful. So I've made a few people happy by hooking them up to each other again.
How do you feel sometimes when you're going through the archive and you're hearing something and you know you're hearing something that no one else has? You don't have to say what you're hearing, but
I suppose it's a lot of that. I can talk to you about that sometime, but it's so, you know, why me? I'm probably the wrong person, or maybe I'm the right person, as I'm not a fanatical fan of it, and I do really appreciate this stuff. You know, I am the keeper of the archive by default, you know.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I do feel as though I've got a duty at some point to get everything down onto hard drive for future generations. I've told my son, if anything happens to me, you're going to have to carry this on, mate. And my stuff as well, because I'm archiving my old stuff as well. From bands in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, before I started to, you know, I stopped. I don't, for whatever reason, but you never stop. I stopped playing live.
Yeah. And
then I just threw my head first into like lighting and touring. So
right on.
Totally broke all the time, you know.
You still enjoy the lighting, the touring?
Yes, I do. I still enjoy it. Yeah. I mean, for me, the exercise as well, especially at my age. But yeah, the exercise, I keep quite fit with it. You know?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, still enjoy it. Yeah. But I don't know where I get. You know, I've got nothing to prove anymore. So you know, maybe at some point I will move on and do other things. I've got a few ideas, things in the pipeline.
I know. You need to finish that book.
Yeah, I mean, somebody suggested to me, some lawyer says, I think you should get together once you've gone through the archive, find some decent stuff and then get together an album of the demos, because there's some good quality stuff in there, and release like a CD or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
and
that'd be cool.
From the basement. So I think Steve Howard, yes, has done it from like demos. He released something, I think, what was it called? From the Basements or something? Something like that. Yeah. It makes me wonder how many archives are hanging around the world in people's attics, just gathering dust and deteriorating. I tell you what shocked me the most is how 50 odd year, I've got a tape that's over 50 years old. It was 1968 from Decca. It's even got the leader tape on it, and it's some demos from the studio, Decca Studios in London. And it's just a take. There's no multi-tracking, and it's the guys with guitars and one with piano. There's about 8 songs on there. How clear as day it is. The old EMI tapes. Fantastic. Then you get Philips stuff of the 70s and 80s. Oh, terrible quality. Absolutely disgusting. And some of the Ampex stuff, because they changed the chemical formula in the 80s. Another company bought them out, and those tapes are dreadful. You have to really bake those before you play them on a machine. So,
well,
it's been a great learning curve.
Great,
and I'm finding family stuff. Geoff used to have an uncle who taught him keyboards when he was young, about 8, and that's when he got into music and played guitar. Guitar was his main instrument, to be honest. Anyway, I found, when I was clearing my mother's loft, I found a suitcase full of old reels of tapes, small, tiny, like 3-inch tapes. I haven't got a machine to play them the right speed. And I've tried putting on this machine here and slowing them down, but the quality's lost. Anyway, one of them was at the right speed, and it had a date on it. Sunday, the 5th of December, 1954. Wow. And I baked it, played it, and clear as day, it's a family gathering in Birmingham, 1954, before Christmas. And it's a sing-song, people having a party at the house, reciting funny poetry, having a chat and laughter. And it goes on for about half an hour. So that, to me, is like an amazing historical artifact.
Yeah.
So I think Birmingham City Museums has like an archive where you can store this stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So, So
well, I hope I'm in London at some point and we cross paths. Maybe you're home, so I could come by and hear some of this stuff.
And you're welcome anytime. Yeah, absolutely. You can have a private hearing. You have to leave your cell phone outside, or you'd be frisked.
Head will just explode. You had told me a few weeks back, you said, hey, remind me, I've got this great story about John Bonham and Geoff.
Oh, I don't think it's that great, but it's an anecdote. I'll tell you. Led Zeppelin were hiding in the way in the Channel Islands, being tax exiles, I believe, in about 1975, in the island of Jersey, which is actually closer to France than it is to the UK. Anyway, the Bandy Legs had a residence, or they played a week or two there in a club called Behans, which is quite a legendary club. You can find it online. And I think it might have been the time they were there with Jimmy Helms as his backing group as well. Anyway, John Bonham was there, and he used to come to the club every night. I think he was, he was a bit of a drinker, old John, as we know. And he used to turn up, and I believe at Malcolmton, I think he played drums with them on stage. He got and played kit with Bandy Legs, and always talked about doing, a project with them, which obviously never happened. So they used to hang out there as a tax exile. So, and anyway, Mick Hopkins, I believe, was in a band with him anyway back in the 60s. He was the guitarist, Mick Hopkins, of course. So they had a connection anyway. They knew each other. I mean, I think the Birmingham music scene at that time was quite incestuous anyway. So, everybody knew everybody.
Yeah. So it never happened.
Sorry, what was that?
The band never happened.
It never happened. It's like the Quartz' first album. Brian May played on it and played a guitar solo on it. But Brian May said, you know what? The original, what Mick did, was actually better. I think they ended up trying to splice the tape. They'd gone out to have a curry, and they came back, and there was like spools of tape all over the floor. Brian was splicing tape, and he said it was quite funny. He was sitting there on the floor, reels of tape, and then he goes, I think the original guitar solo was better. No, not. And Ozzy did backing vocals, but I don't think they're in the mixes. But he officially could not be named on the album for legal reasons. So everybody knew everybody.
Those pesky legal reasons.
Yeah, but legal reasons. Yeah. Let me have a look at my notes. Have I covered things I wanted to say? Just one more thing. A few years back, when I was putting on the YouTube channel, I can't remember how I met him, but there's a guy called Carlo Franzman he was a bass player, and I think he might have played with Tony Martin in South America. They used to pick up a band who they'd meet out there. They'd fly over there, and he'd have a band already knew the songs. And I think he may have been at something to do with that. I'm not sure, 100% sure. But anyway, Carlo kept in touch with me. And I introduced him to Johnny Neal, because he's in his 80s, Johnny. And I said, there's a song here, which is registered. And I said, what do you try and do a cover of this, John, this song? Because I had a song called Ever Seen a Man Cry, which is a great pop song about a man losing his son to war. It's on the YouTube channel, and there's a few covers of it. So Prala got all different musicians, from punk rockers to folk singers, pop singers, acoustic singers in Brazil to do a cover of this song, and he sent me the covers, and I've put a few of them on the YouTube channel. So that was quite interesting. And then local newspapers in Birmingham, John knew one of the journalists that got hold of it, so they put it in the local newspaper. John's big in Brazil, and all that stuff, hyping it up. So I thought that made that Johnny Neal very happy. So, he had his second whiff of fame there. There's fans in Brazil.
Right on, man.
So yeah, that was quite nice. I mean, it's amazing songs which have never ever been published. I keep coming across them. I'm thinking, bloody hell, that's really good. How come that never got published?
Yeah. It happens like that.
Essentially, Geoff was a great pop songwriter.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody came from pop in the 60s, didn't they? There's no alternative.
No. Everyone came from
Yeah. So, do you have any more questions?
No, man. What is the YouTube channel called again?
Geoff Nicholls Archive. And if anyone wants to ask me a question, they can. There is, if you go into community, I think there's the email address, which is sugarrain44@gmail.com. sugarrain44@gmail.com. If anybody has got any questions.
These are questions about anything, you, Geoff?
Anything. Yeah, well, more to do with the archive, really, not to do with me.
Right.
I'm not that interesting.
Hey, I think you are.
Okay. Yes.
Well, man, Gary, I do appreciate your time. I know we've tried this for the last few months.
Oh, no.
But
I've got a bit of a sore throat, so I hope I come across a bit clearer than it sounds to me. So, done in the edit. It's fixed in the edit.
Yeah. My show's called Is Breakfast Included? And if we were having breakfast, what would you have?
Wow, that's a difficult one for me. I'm not always a big breakfast man, but when I do, I normally like the European continental breakfast with cold meats, the hams, cheeses, a bit of cottage cheese, some fruit, yogurt. Yep. So that'll be me. A bit of a lighter because I'm not a big eater in the morning until about an hour after I've started work, and it's like I can't even leave and get a sandwich.
Yeah.
So. So yeah, that would be for me. It wouldn't be so much the English fried breakfast for me. Occasionally, yeah, but not really.
Right on.
Keep it light.
Right on. Well, Gary, yeah. I do appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for talking about yourself, for talking about Geoff, and thanks for keeping that alive, man.
Yeah, that's my mission now.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk to you soon. Good talking to you.
Oh, thanks for your time, mate.
Gary Rees. I told you were going to dig that. Man, he's got some great stories. A lot of them that he couldn't tell on this. And he's, but we understand that, right? We get it. But to have all that to find all that archive and to just slowly keep discovering things like that is just amazing. And Gary's just a really cool person to know and a really cool person to talk to. And like I said, that's how we bonded on the road this past April, May. I think when we were out, March, April, May, when we were in the UK. Anyway, you could check all of this stuff out that he was talking to at Geoff Nicholls Archive. That's Geoff. Nicholls is NICHOLLS Archive. It's really cool. So go check it out, especially if you're a Sabbath fan. Geoff was an integral part of Black Sabbath for many, many years. And it's just really cool to hear those stories. And I've gone through this archive. It's really cool to hear all this music. All right, guys. Don't forget to check out our merch store, isbreakfast.bigcartel.com. Geoff Nicholls Archive on YouTube. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.